Imagine a machine that looked exactly like a typewriter sitting on a desk. Same keys, same metal frame, same satisfying click when you pressed a letter. You would walk past it without a second glance. But this typewriter could win or lose the deadliest war in human history. And the story of how it was broken is one of the strangest, most consequential tales you have probably never heard in full. You're looking at the Enigma machine. And if you had encountered one in the late 1930s, you would have had absolutely no idea that this unassuming device, barely larger than a briefcase, held the fate of millions of people inside its wiring. Here's how it worked. You pressed a letter on the keyboard, and instead of that letter appearing on the page, a completely different letter lit up on a small panel above. Press A and G appears. Press A again, and this time it's M. The same key produced a different encrypted letter every single time you struck it. That was the terrifying genius of it. No pattern you could see. No repetition you could exploit. The message looked like pure, meaningless noise. At least, that's what the German military believed with total confidence. Inside the machine, 3 to 5 rotors, imagine them as heavy brass spinning wheels with 26 contact points each, scrambled every keystroke through a maze of internal electrical connections. After every single key press, the first rotor advanced one position. When it completed a full revolution, the second rotor clicked forward, and so on. The mathematical result was a number so large it barely has a name in common language. Over 158 million possible settings. That is 158 followed by 18 zeros. To put that in perspective, if every person alive on Earth today spent every second of their life testing one setting per second, it would take longer than the current age of the universe to check them all. The German military was so confident in this system that they routed their most sensitive communications through it. Battle plans, submarine patrol routes, troop movements, supply chain logistics, diplomatic cables, everything. They believed with absolute mathematical certainty that no human mind and no machine on Earth could crack what the Enigma produced. They were wrong, and the way they were wrong is one of the most remarkable stories in the history of science, war, and human ingenuity. The story of how the Enigma was defeated does not begin where you might expect, not in the famous Codebreaking Center at Bletchley Park in England. It begins in Warsaw, Poland, in the bitter winter of 1932, with 3 young mathematicians who had just graduated from the University of Poznan. Marian Rejewski was 27 years old. Jerzy Rosiecki was 23. Henryk Zygalski was 24. All 3 had been recruited into the Polish Cipher Bureau, the Biuro Szyfrów, a military intelligence unit that was secretly trying to crack the Enigma years before Britain or France even attempted it seriously. The French had received some internal German documents about Enigma from a spy named Hans-Thilo Schmidt, codenamed Ash, who was selling secrets from the German cipher office in Berlin. These documents included operating manuals and key tables. The French shared them with the Poles, but the information alone was not enough to reconstruct how the machine actually worked inside. Rejewski did something no one else had tried. He used a branch of mathematics called group theory, the study of symmetries, permutations, and the abstract structure of operations, to analyze the patterns in the encrypted messages themselves. What he found was extraordinary. The German operators, the soldiers and radio men typing messages every day, were making tiny, unconscious mistakes. They would choose predictable message keys. They would repeat certain settings out of habit. They would follow procedures that, when examined mathematically, left fingerprints in the ciphertext. Working with these mathematical fingerprints and the limited intelligence from Schmidt, Rejewski reconstructed the internal wiring of all 3 Enigma rotors without ever seeing the inside of the machine. He deduced how electricity flowed through 26 contact points on each rotor, how the reflector scrambled signals, and how the plugboard, a panel of cables on the front of the machine, added an additional layer of substitution. By 1934, the Poles were reading German military communications. They had built mechanical devices they called bombs, named after the ticking, rhythmic sound they made as they ran, that could automatically test thousands of possible rotor configurations. For 5 extraordinary years, a small team in Warsaw held what may have been the greatest intelligence advantage in European history. Then the clock ran out. In the summer of 1939, as Wehrmacht divisions massed along the Polish border and the Luftwaffe prepared for the opening strikes of invasion, the Polish High Command made one of the most consequential decisions in the entire war. They called a secret meeting. On July 25, 1939, just 5 weeks before Germany invaded Poland, representatives of the Büro met with French and British intelligence officers at a secluded facility near Warsaw. At that meeting, the Poles handed over everything: Enigma replicas they had built from scratch, complete mathematical methods for reconstructing rotor wiring, detailed designs for their bomb machines, technical manuals, intercepted messages, decades of accumulated knowledge given away in a single afternoon. The British intelligence officer Alastair Denniston and the French cryptanalyst Gustave Bertrand walked out of that meeting carrying the keys to the most important puzzle of the coming war. Without Poland's gift, the next chapter of this story would never have happened, and that chapter would determine whether the Allies won. In England, a crumbling Victorian estate in Buckinghamshire called Bletchley Park was transformed into the headquarters of the government code and cipher school. Hundreds of mathematicians, linguists, classicists, chess champions, crossword enthusiasts, and university professors were recruited through an elaborate system of discrete approaches, cryptic letters, and whispered conversations. They were told almost nothing about the nature of their work. They signed the Official Secrets Act and vanished from ordinary life. The man who took the lead on Enigma was Alan Turing, a 27-year-old mathematician from King's College, Cambridge, who had already published a paper in 1936 titled On Computable Numbers, a theoretical paper that described, in purely mathematical terms, a universal machine capable of performing any calculation. That paper would eventually become the foundation of every computer ever built. But in 1939, its author was being driven to Bletchley Park in a battered car with a suitcase full of chess problems and a bicycle with a broken chain. Turing took Rejewski's original bomb concept and rebuilt it from the ground up. His version, the British bomb, was an electromechanical machine that stood over 6 feet tall and weighed more than a ton. Rows of rotating drums simulated the Enigma's rotors at high speed, testing possible settings and eliminating wrong answers through a cascading logic process. When it found a contradiction, the machine stopped and moved on. When it found a consistent configuration, it flagged the setting for human verification. But Turing did not work in isolation. Gordon Welchman, another Cambridge mathematician, made a critical enhancement to the bomb design by inventing the diagonal board, a wiring structure that exploited a feature of the Enigma's plug board to dramatically narrow the search space. Turing reportedly called it the single most valuable contribution to the bomb, after his own original design. Dilly Knox, a veteran codebreaker who had worked in British Admiralty intelligence during World War I, led a specialized team focused on the Enigma's naval variant. The naval Enigma used additional rotors and more rigorous operating procedures, making it significantly harder to break. Knox and his team, which included Mavis Lever, who was only 19 years old when she helped break the Italian naval Enigma in 1941, and Margaret Rock, worked through some of the most challenging ciphers of the war. By 1941, Bletchley Park was decoding thousands of German messages every month. The intelligence they produced was given the highest classification in the British system, Ultra. Its very existence was so secret that it was not publicly acknowledged until 1974, when Frederick Winterbotham published The Ultra Secret, the first book about Bletchley Park. For nearly 30 years after the war ended, the people who had worked there could not tell their families what they had done. The impact on the war was devastating for Germany. In the Battle of the Atlantic, German U-boats had been strangling Britain's supply lines with terrifying efficiency. In the first half of 1942, Allied losses to submarines exceeded new ship construction. Britain was running out of food, fuel, and ammunition. Churchill later wrote that the U-boat menace was the only thing that ever truly frightened him during the war. Once Bletchley Park cracked the naval Enigma 4-rotor cipher, aided by the capture of codebooks from U-559 in the Mediterranean in October 1942, the tide turned. Allied convoys were rerouted around known U-boat patrol lines. Submarine supply vessels, called milch cows, were hunted and destroyed. By mid-1943, German submarine losses had become so catastrophic that Admiral Karl Donitz temporarily withdrew his U-boats from the North Atlantic. Before D-Day, the Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, Ultra-intelligence based on Enigma intercepts confirmed that the Germans had been successfully deceived by Operation Fortitude, a massive Allied disinformation campaign that created a fake army group supposedly preparing to invade at Pas-de-Calais. Enigma decrypts showed that German reserves were being held in the wrong position. Hitler was convinced the Normandy landing was a diversion. Eisenhower knew from messages the Germans had typed on their Enigma machines that the invasion window was open. He used it. Sir Harry Hinsley, who had been recruited to Bletchley Park as a 20-year-old undergraduate and later became the official historian of British intelligence, estimated in his 5-volume British Intelligence in the Second World War that ultra-intelligence shortened the war in Europe by at least 2 years. Some modern scholars, including historian Stephen Budiansky in his book Battle of Wits, argue the figure may be closer to 3. 2 or 3 years of war that never happened. Millions of lives that were never consumed by fighting, bombing, and the camps that continued operating with every additional month of conflict. Now consider what was really happening here. The Enigma machine was, at its core, a typewriter with spinning brass rotors and a tangle of electrical wires instead of an ink ribbon, but a typewriter in its bones. Someone sat at a desk every day, placed their fingers on the home row, and typed. The machine hid the truth in plain sight. And here is the part that connects directly to your life right now. Every text message you send, every email you type, every password you enter into a website, every bank transaction you authorize on your phone, all of it passes through encryption systems that are direct descendants of the mathematics performed at Bletchley Park. The fundamental insight that Turing and his colleagues proved on those heavy, ticking machines, that encrypted communication could be systematically broken through mathematical analysis and computational speed, became the basis of modern cybersecurity. When you see the little padlock icon in your browser's address bar, that symbol traces a direct line back to a rotting English mansion where a few hundred people worked in total secrecy to read what a typewriter had written. The Enigma taught humanity 2 lessons. The first was practical. No encryption is truly unbreakable if a human being designed it, because human beings always leave patterns, predictable message keys, lazy procedures, choices that feel random but are not. Rejewski found those patterns with pencil and paper in 1932. Turing automated the search with a room-sized machine in 1940. Today, computers do it billions of times per second. The second lesson is the one that should keep you awake tonight. The most dangerous machine in any conflict, any era, any war, is not the one that makes the loudest noise. It is not the one with the biggest explosion. It is the one that sits quietly on a desk, looks completely ordinary, and waits for someone to press the right keys. The same is true today. The machine has changed. But the principle never has.